Hello, and welcome to the Banker's monthly preview for the April cover story, which looks at the buoyancy in the Asian fintech ecosystem. I'm Joy McKnight, editor of The Banker, and with me in the studio is Kimberly Long, Asia editor, who wrote the cover story. Thanks so much for joining me, Kim.
No problem, Joy.
So there's a lot of movement in the Asian fintech community, and obviously it's been very dynamic. So what are the new things that are coming out of it now?
Yeah, I think with Asia, what's really interesting is we've kind of reached maturity now, I think, in terms of the payment space. So we've seen that for a few years now, especially across China. And now we're really seeing that emergence of like the super apps. So we're seeing that next generation now of the payment apps. You know, it's like the GoTo in Indonesia. We've got WeChat in China as well. And now we're seeing that emerge in other countries too, which I think is really interesting. So one example is in Vietnam, there's an app called Momo, which basically started out as kind of a payments app, but it's actually evolved now into that super app space. So Momo has reached unicorn status as of December 2021 and has received like international funding. It got a chunk of funding from Mizuho in Japan. And it's also been used by 30 million people in a country of 100 million. So when you've kind of caught 30% of the population, you know, it's a pretty big market segment. So I think things like this now are what we're starting to see emerge more and are actually capturing that huge market potential within individual countries in Asia as well, not just the kind of the Chinas, the Singapores that you might think of normally.
Excellent. But obviously the fintech, globally, the fintech investment seen in 2022 was a bit dampened down. But what are we seeing in terms of the investments in Asia?
Well, Asia's kind of remained quite buoyant. So whereas there has been a bit of a decline versus like 2021 previous years, it still stayed really resilient. And we're seeing a lot of VC funding and a lot of private equity funding as well, still being focused into Asia, which is really helping to grow these markets out. But what is actually interesting though is what they're choosing now. So whereas before, maybe it was a bit more kind of a free-for-all, I suppose, where if there was a smaller fintech, it would be a lot of money would be thrown into it. Now the investors are being a lot more particular about what they want. So they want to see things that have a really strong projection of their development. They want to see really strong business ideas. So rather than just looking at anything that might be like neobank or payment space related, they're focusing more now on things like B2B and also on the SME space as well, because that's a really underserved area of the banking community where they can really make some inroads. And I think one good example of this is I spoke with Judo Bank, who are an Australian-based neobank, and they focus on providing support to SMEs. And they were one of the banks that was given a banking license in Australia, I think in 2018. And they were the first of one of four. And they were the first banks to be given a banking license for the first time in 40 years in Australia. However, fast forward only a few years later, they're the only one who's still surviving. All the others have had to close, but they were all focused on consumer payments, consumer banking, whereas Judo has been focused on the business segment, and that's really what's helped to sustain them through the last few years.
Excellent. So that SME space is really booming,
Yes.
I think, and probably across Asia as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. So my other question is really about what are the banks doing? You know, are they getting involved? Where are they most active?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point as well, because where we've seen in the past that question around how are the banks going to compete or going to collaborate with these fintechs, we're starting to see some of the banks carve out their own niches in this space now. And I think in particular, you look at Standard Chartered has their SC Ventures branch and also DBS as well. They're really making a space too. So SC Ventures has worked with a couple of neobanks, which are focused around like numberless card payments and things like that. And with their backing, they've really helped to grow these businesses out, which I think is interesting that they kind of have this hand in developing these neobanks, but they're not actually Standard Chartered SC Ventures branded. And then DBS, who have always been known anyway for being incredibly innovative in the bank space, they're also focusing some attention towards the neobanks, trying to push some of that influence that way. But also DBS have taken an approach around sustainability too, which is slightly different to what others are doing, but it's slightly more innovative as well, trying to develop kind of that sustainability innovation space within banking. So the banks are trying to find their own niches, I think, that they can carve out to still remain relevant, but also have that kind of finger in the pie of what's going on in the fintech space too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kim. You can read Kim's cover feature, as well as all the other features in the April issue, on thebanker.com, as well as a whole bunch of new online-only news analysis.